She had only $6 in her purse. He had a company worth millions, and yet, on that rainy Thursday night at one quiet table by the window, they both sat waiting for someone who would never show up. The bell above the door rang like it had been waiting for her, too loud for the quiet restaurant, too bright for the kind of night she was carrying. Naomi Brooks stepped inside with the careful grace of someone who had learned not to take up too much space. Her dress, a pearl-colored vintage piece that had once belonged to her mother, brushed softly against her knees. She had worn it only once before, at her college graduation, when she had believed the world might finally make room for her. Tonight, it felt like armor she had borrowed from someone braver. The restaurant was not 5-star, but it was the nicest place she had ever been on a date. Dark wood booths lined the walls, and candles flickered on every table like tiny, defiant stars. The smell of lemon butter and garlic drifted through the air, mingling with the low hum of conversation and the occasional laugh that rose, quick and unguarded, from another table. Naomi's hands smoothed the sides of her dress before she followed the hostess to a small table by the window. The light above it glowed softly, a small spotlight that made the moment feel heavier than it already was. She set her purse in her lap and sat with perfect posture, knees together, as though some invisible judge were grading her performance. 6:45 p.m. She was early, 15 minutes. Good. She needed the time. From the next table, Adrian Cole swirled the amber liquid in his glass. He had come here after a meeting that had dragged too long, the kind where everyone in the room was paid to nod. His charcoal suit still held the faint chill of night air, but his mind was far from quarterly reports. When the door chimed, he glanced up without meaning to. He noticed her first as motion, hesitant, hopeful motion. The way she hesitated just past the threshold, scanning the room like she wasn't sure she belonged here. He had seen that look before. In the mirror, years ago, before the boardroom polish and the private driver and the steady weight of running a company that made baby food for millions of children. Naomi's phone was already in her hand. She checked it every few minutes, though nothing new appeared. She tried to look casual, to glance at the entrance as though she were simply admiring the restaurant's decor, but her eyes betrayed her. They always returned to the door. 15 minutes became 20, then 30. The candle on her table had burned lower, its wax pooling slowly at the base. Adrian told himself to look away. This was none of his business. People got stood up all the time. But he had been watching long enough to recognize the small, precise moment when hope fractures. It happened just after her phone buzzed. Naomi's breath caught as she snatched it up, but the message wasn't what she had been waiting for. "Wow, you actually went. I was just messing with you. You seem nice, but honestly, not my type. Not worth the Uber." She read it twice, then locked the screen. For a moment she sat perfectly still, as though frozen mid-scene. Then her jaw set and she straightened in her seat, her spine like a pillar holding up everything else. Her hands curled around the napkin in her lap. She would not cry. Not here. The room went on without her. Glasses clinked. A couple at the bar kissed without shame. Somewhere behind her a server laughed softly at a private joke, and yet all of it felt far away, muffled, as though someone had pressed a hand over her ears. Adrian's chest tightened with an ache he did not expect. He remembered being 22 and waiting outside a scholarship office that never called his name. Remembered standing in a rain-soaked suit after his first investor pulled out of his startup with 2 sentences over the phone. Remembered the way disappointment felt heavy, like it was pressing on the ribs, trying to shrink you into something smaller. Naomi reached into her purse, pulled out a single folded $6 bill. Her emergency money. She glanced at the menu as though calculating what dignity might cost here. A cup of tea? Maybe soup? Then she began to rise, moving slow as though every step was made of glass. Adrian pushed his chair back. He did not think about it. He did not debate whether it was his place. He simply stood and caught the eye of the nearest server, murmuring a quiet request. By the time Naomi reached for her coat, a plate had arrived at her table. Pasta glistening with butter and herbs, steam rising like a blessing. A tall glass of sparkling lemonade beside it. She blinked, startled. I didn't order this. The server smiled gently. It's taken care of. Your tab's been covered. Her first thought was fear. Some kind of joke? Another cruel trick? Then she heard the voice behind her, calm and low. It's not charity. It's a reminder. Naomi turned. The man from the next table was standing, one hand resting casually on the back of his chair. His expression was unreadable, except for his eyes. Steady, honest. You deserve to eat, he said softly, even if the world tries to tell you otherwise. Something in her chest shifted. She didn't know him, didn't owe him anything. But for a moment she sat back down, staring at the steam rising from the plate, and felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Seen. Adrian pulled out the chair across from hers and sat down, uninvited but not unwelcome. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Finally, he said, "Take care of your stomach before you try taking care of someone else's heart." Naomi blinked. It was not the line she expected. It wasn't pity. It wasn't flirtation. It was truth, dropped like a stone into the quiet between them. Her fork trembled slightly as she reached for it. Somewhere outside, traffic moved on. Somewhere in the kitchen, a pan clattered. Somewhere in the world, another girl was probably waiting for another man who would never come. But here, in this small corner by the window, something had shifted, and neither of them looked away. The rain had stopped by morning, but the city still smelled like wet pavement and restless dreams. Naomi walked quickly, clutching her worn coin purse, its single $6 bill folded carefully inside. She had a 2-hour gap between classes and work, just enough to grab a coffee, maybe steady her heart before the next 12-hour day. The cafe was warm when she stepped inside, cinnamon and roasted beans softening the edges of her mood. A bell above the door chimed, smaller and kinder than the one at the restaurant last night. She let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Then she heard it. "Make that one, too," a calm baritone said. Naomi froze. She turned slowly, and there he was. Adrian Cole, the man from the restaurant, sleeves rolled up, tie gone, laptop half open on a corner table. He looked nothing like the corporate giant she had imagined last night. He looked human. The barista smiled. "He already paid." Naomi hesitated, then crossed the room. "You remembered my name?" she asked quietly. Adrian's mouth curved just slightly. "I remembered your courage." The name was the easy part. Her heart jolted once, hard enough to make her blink. She sat across from him without quite meaning to, the warmth of the mug seeping into her hands. "You didn't have to," she said. "I know." He closed his laptop halfway, giving her his full attention. "But last night, you reminded me of someone I used to be." Naomi frowned. "Someone who bought dinner for strangers?" Adrian shook his head. "No. Someone who waited, believing the world might still keep its promises." The words landed deep. Naomi looked down at the foam on her coffee, tracing it with her fingertip. She had no idea why she was telling him, but the words came anyway. It wasn't just a date. It was the first time I'd said yes in months, years, if I'm honest. Adrian didn't interrupt. He didn't look away. "And when he didn't come," she said softly, "it felt stupid that I ever thought he would." Silence stretched. The cafe's grinder whirred. Somewhere near the window, a toddler squealed with laughter. "You showed up," Adrian said at last. His voice was low, but there was a quiet conviction in it. That still counts for something. Naomi's throat tightened. She had been called naive before, soft-hearted, too trusting. This was the first time anyone had called her brave. Adrian leaned back, exhaling. "We just had a product launch last month," he said, almost casually. "Total disaster. Wrong slogan, wrong timing. Got roasted online for a week straight." Naomi blinked, surprised at the turn in conversation. "Someone made a meme of me holding baby food like it was poison." His grin was faint, but real. "Went viral. My investors nearly had heart attacks." Naomi laughed despite herself. It was a small, startled sound, but it loosened something in her chest. Adrian watched her quietly. "See? That's better." Her smile faded a little. "Better? Than the girl who sat at that table last night trying not to disappear." Naomi looked away, embarrassed by how much he had seen. But when she glanced back, he wasn't pitying her. His eyes were steady, like he was holding space for her to exist exactly as she was. Somewhere inside her, a wall shifted. Before she could think of what to say, her phone buzzed. The name on the screen made her stomach drop. It was the same man from last night, the one who had humiliated her. She turned the screen face down on the table. Adrian's brow lifted slightly, but he said nothing. Naomi took a slow breath, then deleted the thread right there in front of him. The screen went blank, clean. Adrian smiled faintly. Good. It wasn't praise. It wasn't approval. It sounded more like relief. They sat a little longer, drinking coffee, talking about nothing that mattered. Bad haircuts, favorite snacks, the worst exam questions professors had ever asked. And when Naomi stood to leave, Adrian didn't try to stop her. No offer to walk her out. No demand for her number. Just a quiet, "Take care of yourself." And for the first time in a long time, Naomi believed she just might. The library had always been Naomi's refuge. It was warm, tucked between two office buildings, with a quiet study room that overlooked a tiny garden full of stubborn green vines. She came here between shifts whenever she could, letting the silence settle her pulse. This afternoon, the room smelled faintly of old pages and fresh rain from the open windows. Naomi carried a stack of borrowed textbooks against her chest, her hair pulled into a neat bun, cardigan sleeves pushed up. The world felt almost steady again. Then she saw him. Adrian stood by the children's corner, a small girl's hand wrapped in his. He was not the man in a suit from the restaurant, not the confident CEO from the cafe. He looked softer somehow, one hand steadying a picture book, the other ruffling the child's hair. Naomi's breath caught before she could decide why. Adrian looked up at the sound of her steps. Surprise flickered, then something warmer. "Hey," he said softly, like he wasn't sure he had the right to greet her here. Naomi lifted the books slightly. "Returning these," she said. Her voice was casual, but her heart had kicked up its pace. The little girl peeked out from behind Adrian's leg, wide-eyed. "This is Arya," Adrian said, his voice instinctively gentler now. "She's 3, a little shy." Naomi knelt slowly, letting her face come level with the child's. "Hi, Arya," she said softly. For a beat, the girl just stared. Then she stepped forward on small, careful feet and touched the hem of Naomi's cardigan. "She smells like Mommy," Arya whispered. Time stopped. Adrian froze as if struck. His fingers tightened imperceptibly on the back of a nearby chair. Naomi's hand hovered, afraid to move, afraid to break whatever spell had just been cast. When she finally spoke, her voice was almost a whisper. "Well," she said gently, "that's a big compliment. Your mommy must have smelled like kindness." Arya nodded solemnly, then padded toward the shelves, already reaching for a book. Naomi rose slowly, eyes searching Adrian's face. His jaw was tight, his breath shallow. "She passed away 2 years ago," he said quietly, without looking at Naomi. "Arya doesn't usually say things like that." Naomi wanted to step closer, but something in his posture told her to wait. "I'm sorry," she said simply. And she meant it, not as an obligation, but as someone who had just glimpsed the outline of a wound still healing. Adrian nodded once, staring past her, as though the library shelves were suddenly a window into some night he wished he could rewrite. Silence stretched. Not the heavy silence of the restaurant, but a tender one, holding grief carefully. Naomi shifted the stack of books in her arms. "Would you like me to read with her?" she asked softly. Adrian's gaze finally returned to her, steady now. He hesitated only a second before nodding. Minutes later, Naomi sat cross-legged on the carpet. Arya nestled against her side as she turned the pages of a picture book. Her voice was calm, even, carrying the gentle rhythm of a lullaby. From across the room, Adrian watched them, his daughter's small hand gripping Naomi's sleeve, Naomi's head tilted toward the child, her expression soft but unwavering. He hadn't realized how empty this corner of his life had felt until now. For the first time in months, maybe years, Adrian did not feel like a man balancing work, grief, and fatherhood on a single fraying thread. He felt, if only for a moment, like a man watching something being stitched back together. When the book ended, Arya giggled softly and asked for another. Naomi smiled, turning to the next one without hesitation. Adrian exhaled slowly, and something inside him eased, just enough to let the air in. The message came late in the afternoon, short and strained. "Arya's running a fever. We're home. I don't know what else to do." Naomi stared at the screen, her nursing notes still spread across the library desk. She didn't hesitate. By the time the sun slid behind the buildings, she was standing at Adrian's door with a canvas tote and her heart pounding. The house smelled faintly of lemon and medicine. The living room light was on, warm but tired, and on the couch lay Arya, her cheeks flushed, her hair sticking to her temples. Adrian stood nearby, sleeves rolled, looking more exhausted than she had ever seen him. "She won't sleep," he said quietly. "I've tried everything." Naomi set the bag down and knelt by the couch. "Hi, sweet girl," she murmured. Arya's eyes fluttered open, and she reached for Naomi without a word. Naomi's hands were cool and gentle, brushing the damp hair from the little girl's forehead. "You're burning up," she said softly. From her bag, she pulled a soft towel wrapped in wax paper, still cool from the fridge. "This is an old trick," she explained, pressing it gently against Arya's forehead. "Lavender helps the head and the heart." Arya sighed, her breathing easing just slightly. Adrian sank into the armchair opposite, elbows on knees, watching in silence. Naomi began to hum, soft at first, almost like a breath, and then the melody took shape. A simple lullaby, altered with nonsense words, the kind meant to make a child giggle through their tears. Halfway through the first verse, Adrian's head snapped up. He knew that song. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. It had been nearly 3 years since he'd heard it. 3 years since his wife used to hum it when Arya was still small enough to curl against her chest after a nightmare. He hadn't realized how much he'd missed the sound until now. Naomi's voice trembled as she caught the look on his face, but she kept singing, the notes filling the room like a prayer. When the song ended, the house was quiet. Arya had drifted into sleep, her small hand still gripping Naomi's sleeve. Naomi turned her head slowly. "I didn't know," she whispered. Adrian pressed a hand to his face, as if trying to steady himself. "You couldn't have," he said hoarsely. "She used to sing that every night. I thought Arya had forgotten." Naomi looked down at the sleeping child. "Children don't forget love," she said gently. "They just wait to hear it again." Something inside Adrian gave way. He leaned back, eyes burning, and for the first time in 2 years, he let the tears fall. Not the quiet kind he had hidden in hotel bathrooms, but the sudden, unstoppable kind that left no room for pride. Naomi stayed where she was, her head resting against the couch, letting the silence hold him. She didn't offer comfort or platitudes. She simply stayed, breathing with him until the storm passed. When Adrian finally spoke, his voice was low. "I've spent every day trying to make sure she didn't see me break. But maybe she needed to know I could." Naomi looked at him across the dimly lit room, her own throat tight. "Maybe she just needed to know you were still here," she said. He nodded slowly, wiping his face with the back of his hand. For a long time they sat like that, one man, one woman, and a sleeping child, each of them stitched together by something too fragile to name, but too real to ignore. And when Naomi finally rose to leave, Adrian stopped her with just a word. "Stay," he said quietly. She did. The conference room smelled faintly of brewed coffee and new carpet. Rows of folding chairs faced a projector screen glowing with cheerful slides, smiling toddlers, bright vegetables, taglines promising healthy growth. Naomi sat in the third row, a notepad balanced on her knee. She hadn't meant to come, but Adrian had texted a week earlier. "Thought this might align with your studies. No pressure, no pressure." But the truth was, her heart had been restless since that night on the couch. She wanted to see him, see them, if she was honest. Adrian stood near the back of the room, blazer buttoned, hands in his pockets. He wasn't leading the session, just observing, but his eyes kept finding her, like a compass that refused to reset. The presentation began smoothly enough. Charts, percentages, happy sound bites about allergen-free recipes. Naomi listened, pen poised. But halfway through the section on preservatives, something caught her attention. The slide listed numbers that didn't add up. Sodium levels too high for the age group, a footnote about safe exposure that contradicted what she had just studied last week in pediatrics. Her heart thudded once, hard. She raised her hand. "Yes?" the presenter said, a little too cheerful. "Can you clarify your data source for this preservative threshold?" Naomi asked, voice steady. "Because the numbers on your slide are higher than the 2022 Pediatric Dietary Guidelines. And if parents follow this blindly, children with mild allergies might have complications." The room went still. A few heads turned. The presenter blinked, caught off guard. That's a very good question," he said finally, fumbling with the remote. "I might need to check with our research team for updated figures." Naomi didn't flinch. She waited. From the back of the room, Adrian watched the entire exchange. He felt something in his chest tighten, not with fear, but with pride so sharp it almost hurt. He had seen sharp interns and clever marketers, but what Naomi had just done was different. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She was trying to protect someone who couldn't speak for themselves. A ripple of murmurs spread through the room. A pediatrician in the second row nodded thoughtfully. "She's right," the doctor said quietly. "I caught that too." The presenter swallowed hard, promising a revised slide in the follow-up notes. Naomi sat back down, heart hammering but face calm. Adrian's lips curved faintly as he exhaled. He had invited her here because he thought she might enjoy the content. He hadn't expected her to change it. After the session ended, people swarmed the snack table, chatting, networking, exchanging business cards. Naomi slipped out quietly, heading for the door. "Naomi?" Adrian called softly. She turned. "You didn't just attend that session," he said, stepping closer. "You made it better." Naomi flushed slightly. "I didn't mean to embarrass anyone." "You didn't." His voice was firm. "You reminded them that children aren't numbers on a slide. That still matters." Naomi's throat tightened. No one had ever said it like that. For a moment, they just stood there in the hallway, the chatter from the room fading behind them. Adrian's gaze softened. "Do you have time for coffee?" Naomi hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah," she said quietly. "I think I do." They walked out together into the late afternoon light, something unspoken hanging between them, something that felt dangerously close to respect and maybe even hope. The park was alive with Saturday light, children shrieking on the swings, leaves spinning lazily in the wind. Naomi sat on the grass, her shoes off, letting the late sun warm her ankles. Aria was chasing soap bubbles across the grass, her giggles carried by the breeze. For the first time in weeks, Naomi felt almost light again. Then Aria stumbled. It was a small trip, barely more than a wobble, but the sound that came out of Adrian was sharp. Too sharp. Like glass cracking. "Aria!" He was up before Naomi could react, crossing the grass in 3 long strides, scooping the little girl into his arms. "I'm fine, Daddy," Aria protested, wriggling, but Adrian's hand was already on her forehead, his eyes scanning her face like a medic on a battlefield. Naomi rose slowly, brushing grass from her skirt, watching the tightness in his jaw. "She just tripped," Naomi said gently. "She's been fragile since that fever," Adrian muttered, holding Aria too close. "You don't understand. Last time, her fever spiked in 20 minutes. Naomi stepped closer, voice low but steady. "And you handled it. She's here. She's healthy." Adrian glanced at her, something stormy in his expression. "You think I overreacted?" Naomi met his gaze. "I think you love her so much it scares you." For a moment, the air went still. Adrian's shoulders dropped a fraction, the words hitting deeper than he expected. Aria squirmed until he set her down. "I'm okay," she said again, this time softer, almost like she was reassuring him. Naomi crouched to the child's level, brushing a curl off her forehead. "Your dad just worries because you're his favorite person," she said. Aria grinned, grabbing Naomi's hand. "He worries about you too," she said innocently. Adrian let out a slow breath, some of the tension leaving his body. He sat down heavily on the grass, elbows on his knees. "I hate how quickly it all unravels," he admitted, voice low. "One little cough and I'm back in the hospital room, back watching the numbers climb on the monitor." Naomi sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. "Trauma doesn't keep time," she said softly. "It just waits, but so does healing." Adrian looked at her then, really looked, at the steady set of her mouth, the calm in her dark eyes. "You always know what to say," he said quietly. "No," Naomi said, shaking her head. "I just stay long enough to listen." Aria plopped down on the grass between them, still holding Naomi's hand with one and Adrian's with the other. "Can we stay a little longer?" she asked. Neither adult answered right away, but eventually Adrian nodded. "Yeah," he said softly. "We can stay." And they did. 3 figures in the golden light, as if the park itself had decided to hold them a little longer before letting the world rush back in. The invitation had come with no fanfare, just a short message from Adrian that said, "Dinner's at 7. Not an emergency this time, just if you're free." Naomi stood outside his house for a full minute before knocking, heart thudding in her ears. This wasn't a fever call or a quick drop-off of documents. This was something else. Adrian opened the door, sleeves rolled, apron still around his waist. The smell of roasted vegetables and garlic butter drifted out into the night. "You cook?" Naomi said, eyebrows raised. "Only on nights when I don't want to think about spreadsheets," Adrian replied, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Inside, the table was already set. 3 places, candles lit, nothing too formal but not careless either. Arya was crouched in the living room, arranging picture books into neat piles. When she saw Naomi, she leapt up and ran straight into her arms. "You came!" Arya beamed. "Daddy said you might." Naomi laughed, the last of her nerves loosening as she hugged the little girl tight. Dinner was simple, pasta with fresh herbs, salad, warm bread, but it felt like a feast. Arya chattered between bites, explaining which of her stuffed animals was in preschool trouble and which one had graduated nap time. Naomi listened, smiling, letting the child's voice fill the room like music. Adrian watched them from across the table, saying little, his expression softer than Naomi had ever seen it. There was something dangerous about this calm, something that made her pulse quicken. Halfway through dinner, the power flickered. Just once, enough to make the candles seem suddenly brighter. Naomi glanced up at Adrian. "You didn't invite me just because of a blackout drill, did you?" she teased. His smile deepened, but his eyes were unreadable. "No." "I invited you because—" He stopped, the words catching. For a moment, Naomi thought he might actually say it, that quiet, unspeakable thing hanging between them. Instead, he reached for the basket of bread and passed it to her. "Because Arya's been asking when you'd come back," he said. Naomi accepted it, hiding the way her heart had just dropped and risen all at once. After dinner, Arya insisted on a story. They sat on the couch, Naomi reading aloud while Adrian leaned back, one arm draped along the top of the sofa. The lamplight caught the edges of his face, making him look both younger and impossibly tired. When the story ended and Arya finally fell asleep against Naomi's shoulder, Adrian moved quietly to carry the child upstairs. Naomi stayed on the couch, listening to the faint creak of steps, the soft sound of Adrian humming under his breath. When he returned, the house felt different, quieter, heavier. "Thank you," he said, sitting across from her. "For what?" "For showing up. Twice now." His gaze was steady, and Naomi felt the air shift between them. She could feel the words he wasn't saying, just like he could probably feel hers, but neither of them broke the silence. When Naomi finally stood to leave, Adrian walked her to the door. His hand brushed the frame as if he wanted to reach for her, but stopped himself at the last moment. "Good night, Naomi," he said softly. "Good night," she replied. And as she stepped out into the night air, she realized that whatever this was, it was no longer just kindness. It was something that might one day have to be named. The envelope was thin, almost weightless, but Naomi's hands shook as she held it. Her name was printed neatly on the front, the logo of the scholarship committee stamped in dark ink. She sat on the edge of her bed for a long time before tearing it open. "We are pleased to inform you," her breath caught. "Full tuition. 1-year program. Pediatric specialization. Oregon." Everything she had dreamed of since nursing school. The chance to finally specialize, to do something that mattered, was right there, in black and white. But her chest tightened, not with joy, but with something else. Leaving meant leaving this city. Leaving the warm kitchen table where Arya had giggled just nights ago. Leaving Adrian's quiet gaze that lingered too long and said too much without words. Naomi pressed the letter against her chest. For a moment, she let herself imagine saying no. But the thought of regret years from now was heavier than the ache she felt now. She didn't tell Adrian right away. 3 days passed before she found herself back at the park, Arya running after a trail of soap bubbles again. Adrian sat on the bench, his phone in his hand but unread. Naomi sat beside him, the letter folded neatly in her coat pocket. "I got something in the mail," she said finally. Adrian glanced at her, a faint smile tugging at his mouth. "Good news, I hope?" She nodded, eyes on the ground. "I got the scholarship, Oregon. It starts in August." The wind stirred, scattering golden leaves across their feet. Adrian was quiet for a long moment, his face unreadable. Then he smiled, not the polite kind, not the CEO smile he wore for investors, but something quieter, more real. "That's incredible, Naomi," he said. "You earned it." She looked at him sharply, searching for resentment, for disappointment. "You think I should go?" He nodded once. "You should." "But what if—" She swallowed hard. "What if you think I'm just leaving when things get good? Like I used you for stability and now I'm running?" Adrian's gaze softened. He leaned forward, resting his forearms on his knees. "Loving someone," he said slowly, "doesn't mean holding them. It means not clipping their wings." The words landed like a stone dropped into a still pond, ripples spreading through her chest. For a moment, Naomi couldn't speak. The ache in her throat was too strong. Arya came running back then, clutching a bubble wand. "Naomi, look!" Naomi forced a smile and cheered with her, but her heart was pounding. When Adrian rose to take Arya's hand, Naomi stayed sitting, gripping the edge of the bench like it was the only solid thing in the world. She had wanted clarity, and Adrian had given it to her. But it didn't make the decision hurt any less. That night, Naomi stood by her apartment window, the letter open on her desk. The city lights blurred as tears filled her eyes. She wasn't crying because she had to leave. She was crying because, for the first time in her life, someone was letting her go without making her feel abandoned. The night before her flight, Naomi almost didn't go. Her suitcase sat by the door, zipped, her boarding pass already downloaded. All she had to do was sleep a few hours, wake up, and go. Then her phone buzzed. "Dinner's at 7. Arya made something for you." She went. Adrian's house glowed with soft lamplight when she arrived. The table was set with candles again, just like that first dinner, but different now. This table knew her. Arya barreled toward the door, pigtails bouncing, clutching something in her hands. "Look!" she cried, unfolding a long paper chain, each link carefully colored. "One for every week until you come back." Naomi's throat closed. She knelt and let Arya wrap the chain around her shoulders like a shawl. "It's perfect," she whispered, hugging the little girl tight. Dinner was quiet, but not sad. They ate pasta, because Arya insisted it had to be Naomi's favorite. They laughed when Adrian accidentally dropped a piece of bread into the salad bowl. For a moment, it almost felt like a celebration, not a goodbye. Afterward, Adrian walked her to the porch while Arya cleaned up her crayons inside. The air was cool, heavy with the smell of rain. Naomi stood with her arms crossed, not to protect against the chill, but to hold herself together. "I should tell you," Adrian said finally, leaning against the doorframe. "When you first walked into that restaurant with $6 in your purse, I thought you were just someone to feel sorry for. Naomi's lips parted, but he held up a hand. But then you didn't cry. You didn't break. You sat back down and ate the dinner I sent you like it was a battle flag. That was the night I stopped feeling sorry for you and started respecting you. Naomi blinked hard, fighting the sting in her eyes. You really know how to make a goodbye harder? You know that? Adrian's mouth curved, but his eyes stayed serious. I'm not saying goodbye. Just letting you go. There's a difference. Silence stretched, heavy but not empty. When Naomi finally turned to leave, Adrian didn't stop her. He only said, "Call when you land, even if it's 3 a.m. She nodded once, unable to speak, and stepped off the porch. Halfway down the walk, she turned. Adrian was still there, one hand braced against the doorframe, watching her like a man memorizing something he couldn't keep. That night, Naomi cried. Not because she felt abandoned, but because for the first time in her life, someone was letting her go without letting her down. The elevator chimed softly as it opened onto the rooftop garden. Naomi stepped out into late afternoon light, her white coat freshly pressed, the new ID badge clipped proudly at her chest. Registered nurse. The rooftop was strung with warm Edison bulbs, rows of herbs swaying gently in the breeze. A long table displayed pastel-colored packaging, each box marked with the name of the new product line, her first spoon. The silhouette on the side of the box, of a woman cradling a child, made Naomi stop in her tracks. This is for you, a quiet voice said behind her. Naomi turned. Adrian stood by the podium, navy suit crisp, but his face softer than she remembered. Months had changed him, too, less sharp around the edges, more at ease in his own skin. He stepped closer, and the rooftop seemed to go still. I wasn't sure you'd come, he said. Naomi held up her badge. I wasn't sure you'd still remember me. Adrian's smile was small, steady. Impossible. The noise of the event faded as he reached into his pocket and drew out a small box. He didn't kneel, didn't make a grand speech, just opened it. Inside, a simple ring with one unassuming stone that seemed to catch every last ray of light. I don't want to save you, Adrian said quietly. I just want to stay, if you'll let me. Naomi's breath caught. She didn't cry this time, didn't tremble. She simply nodded, because for the first time in her life, she wasn't choosing out of fear or need, but from a place of peace. That evening, they went back to the restaurant where it had all begun. The bell above the door chimed, softer now, like it recognized them. The hostess led them to the same table by the window, except this time there were 3 chairs. Aria trotted ahead, navy dress swishing, pigtails bouncing. She clambered into her seat while Adrian pulled out the chair for Naomi. The candles flickered just like that first night, but the air was different now, warm, unhurried. Adrian handed Naomi a menu with a playful smile. Order everything you want, he said. Naomi laughed softly, eyes glimmering. You remember everything? I remember you. At that moment, Aria dug into her little backpack and proudly unfolded a crayon drawing. A table with 3 stick figures, one with curly pigtails, one tall with glasses, and one with dark hair pulled back neatly. Above them, a yellow sun smiled. This is us, Aria said, grinning. And that's spaghetti, because Mommy Naomi likes spaghetti. Naomi's hand trembled as she touched the paper. She looked at Adrian, who just nodded. No words needed. Outside, night had settled over the city. But inside, at one small table with 3 chairs, something new had begun. Not a rescue, not a fairy tale, just a family, quietly, miraculously choosing to stay. Thank you for sitting with us until the very last moment of this story. Maybe you saw yourself in Naomi, showing up even when hope felt small. Maybe you felt Adrian's quiet fear, learning that love sometimes means letting go. Somewhere tonight, someone is still waiting at a table for kindness, for courage, for a chance to be seen. If this story touched you, let it stay with you. And if you'd like to hear more stories like this, stay with us, subscribe, turn on the bell, because the next story might be the one that changes everything.